Debbie Ritchie, she's running for Anne Arundel County Council District 3. Debbie, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
So explain to our viewers where District 3 is, because I don't know where it is.
It's right in the heart of Pasadena. It encompasses all of Pasadena. A little bit of Curtis Bay, a little bit of Glen Burnie, but the bulk of it is Pasadena.
Okay, so we were talking to you before the interview. I know that you were on the Board of Education, which I did not know that, Anne Arundel County Board of Education for 5 years. So talk to us a little bit about that, other experience that you have, and then what really made you want to throw your hat in the race to become our next councilwoman for District 3.
Okay, I actually started 20 years ago in PTA when my daughter went to elementary school.
Gotcha.
And that's important because that kind of has framed who I am now and what I want to bring to the position of the council and why I chose to run. And so in the PTA, you know, people have their conceptions of what PTA is, and I wanted to be the ability to bring people together and be family friendly and, you know, revolve around kids as opposed to fundraisers and raising money to buy things. So I actually got into it because I don't like fundraising, which, you know, people kind of
Which is funny because, you know, it's like you're just running a campaign, no big deal.
But we did do fundraising, but we did it in a way that was going to be not as invasive to people. You know, when you sell wrapping paper, you know, you buy all these little tchotchkes and stuff. So, you know, I said, well, we're not going to do it like that. And they go, well, you have to. And that's always been sort of I have found that is me all the way along. People say, well, that's the way you always do it. And I go, well, that's not the way I want to do it.
Right.
And so that's kind of been who I am and how I've gone all the way through. So I was at the local level, I was a council president for 4 years. I was the state PTA president for 2 years. And then when that completed, the seat opened for the Board of Education. And I threw my hat in the ring and became a member of the Board of Education. And it seemed like a accumulation of what I had been working for.
Right, absolutely.
Without really realizing that's what it was.
Right.
I had reapplied to be on the board again for another 5-year term. I really enjoyed being there.
What did you get done in the first 5 years?
Oh, well, you know, a couple things actually. One of the main things we did was to develop outreach. People always could you could always email board members, you could, you know, call them and things. But we decided, a couple of us, Andrew Pruski being one as well, who's now a councilman as well.
Right.
We decided, you know what, we want to go into the community and have a free forum where people can come and talk to us for whatever they want to talk about.
Right. So
the first one we did was at the mall. I said, Andrew, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to go to some place where we can sit down and have conversations. It was interesting, but so we started arranging. We plotted out. We went to 4 different areas within the county, and we just sat in the library. And people who came, we just discussed whatever the problems were, whatever their issues were, and started getting information from them and helping to open up the dialogue and helping to connect people. So that was one of the things that we did, was the outreach. Also, while I was there, I personally just did an email newsletter to all the PTA and PTO presidents in the schools in my district and to all the principals. And it was very simple. It was just this is what's happening. I talked a lot about the budget process, how those things,
right.
I talked a lot about policy,
right.
why that was important. I had a little section about policy, and I did that for 3 years. And I sent it to everybody just to kind of do that bridge where they were getting information, right, and starting to learn about, because when you're in your school, your focus is that school, and you don't necessarily sometimes understand the whole big picture. You know, we can make a policy that this group over here doesn't like, but this group over here does, and
right.
But we have to look at the whole big picture. And so while I came from one district and was in that area, my focus was also to make sure that we were looking at what's best for the entire system. So that was a way to get information out to people. I encouraged them to contact me. Sometimes I got some stuff. Most of the time I wasn't. We did a lot of school visits. And then another thing we did, which was really quite controversial, but it really has turned out to be very good, is the CAC. The CAC is the Citizens Advisory Committee. And their purpose is to provide feedback to the board and for the board to provide information to them on things that they want to know more about. Maybe how the community's feeling on something, what's the pulse of the county in terms of things. Well, the way the CAC was before, I mean, it was anybody could come, but there wasn't fair representation. There were only a handful of people who had a very, very focused agenda, which was fine, but it really wasn't serving the purpose that we wanted to serve.
Right.
So after a year of other board members going and observing and talking, we decided to change the policy to create a CAC that would ensure that we had representation from all clusters and from both middle school and high school and elementary school. And also that was a diverse group of people, that we didn't have just a single group of people, that there were also diversity in there. And that was not necessarily well received. It was perceived as being we were trying to force an agenda on anybody, and it really wasn't. What we were trying to do was create an environment that was truly reflective of the county that we're in. Okay. And so that occurred, and fortunately I had the opportunity to go back to the Board of Ed beginning of June for Tyson Bennett was retiring, and the CAC rep got up to give their report, and they talked about the written report that had been submitted by the committees, and I was so pleased because that is exactly where we wanted it to be. They form the committees, they being the CAC in the beginning of their term, decide what committees they want to have, and then they do the research. They could be on accountability, it could be on testing, it could be on diversity, it could be on bullying, it could be on whatever they wanted it to be on. And then they did all the research and what they wanted to find out, and then they made recommendations to the Board of Education. And I'm very proud that is something that I was part of, because it's always been important that we bring as many people together to be able to have discussions about whatever, and then make decisions that we can all own.
Right.
And so that's sort of been all my journey up to now, has been that. So I decided I wanted to re-up for the board, and I did apply. My name was sent forward to the governor. But the elections occurred, and the governor changed to, even though it's a nonpartisan
position,
and,
right?
And nobody ever said to me definitively, but sometimes you can read the writing on the wall. And so I kind of figured I wasn't going to be reappointed, but I never heard from anybody. The governor's office, who makes the appointment because it's a state agency, never communicated in any form. I was on my way into work on a Saturday afternoon, and I got a tweet from the reporter from the Capitol wanting to know how I felt about not being reappointed.
That's how you found out. It's almost like feeling from, it's almost like the same notifications that you get if you get fired for being a senior staffer at the White House.
Yeah.
Where you just get fired in a tweet.
Yeah. And it wasn't devastating, because I knew that was, but I felt very dismissed and disregarded for my service that I had,
that you had done, right?
That had done. I didn't go to the Board of Education with the idea that I was going to do anything else. I came to the Board of Education because I've been involved in education all my way through. My daughter entered kindergarten, I went with her, and we worked all the way through. I'm a nurse by trade, so service is part of who I am and what I do. And to receive not even to receive the courtesy of a call, a letter, an email,
right?
Nothing. And that was really quite. It just really made me mad.
Right.
And so, somebody jokingly said, "Oh, you should run for the county council." I'm like, "Yeah, right." And then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, why couldn't I run? I could run just as anybody else could run. So I gave it some serious thought. What would I bring to the council? What would I do? Why would I want to do it? I mean, it's one thing to get angry and do something, but it's another thing to then have to serve.
Right, absolutely.
And you can't serve because you're mad at somebody else. So I gave it a lot of thought and consideration, and talked to my family, talked to friends, and I thought, you know what? I look at the council as it is now. There's very little, if any, diversity on there. I mean, we have one African American on there. Mm. It's all male on there, and it doesn't represent our county. And you have to have that in there.
Multicultural representation,
right.
So that way everybody's represented.
Everybody's represented, and everybody's voice, because my voice is different than your voice.
Right.
The way I think is different than you think, not because but because of age differences, gender, we just do those things. So
You being younger than me, right?
Right. Close. Thanks.
All right. So what will you bring to the table if you're elected to the Anne Arundel County Council? And we'll talk about specific policy in a moment. But I mean, what are you going to bring? What do you think you'll bring?
I'll bring exactly what I've always brought, and that's the questions to ask. When I would go, one of the things that used to frustrate me when I was the council president for the PTA, sitting in the boardroom, is a board member would ask a question, and the employee at the table would go, well, we'll get back to you. Well, I never found the answer, and I may have wanted to know. So one of the things that I did when I was on the board was I would let the staff know questions I was going to ask, whether I knew the answers or not. Sometimes I knew the answers already,
Right.
but we needed to get out there. And I would let them know ahead of time because I expected answers when I asked the question.
Right.
Because that was a way to ensure that people all heard, sometimes your busy life, you don't go back and look up the information. So one of the things, and I'm always the kind of what if, it doesn't mean I'm against something, it's that you wanna do this, what if we do that, what is that going to do, what is that going to mean? An example is development, which is a big issue.
The first question I was going to ask
Right.
you.
Which is a big issue. I'm not against development. I'm against development for the sake of just doing something. I'm against just, here's a piece of land, let's stick something on it. What I want is for people to come together and go, okay, you know what? We agree. We need to do whatever we need to do here. But what do we want to have there? What do we as a community want to have as part of our community? An example is in our community, they were going to put another Royal Farms in. We had a Royal Farms a half mile from the one that they were going to, actually a half mile in one direction and a half mile in the other direction. Why did we really need to have a Royal Farms?
Yeah.
So if we had maybe brought the community together and had a discussion about it, we could have maybe then said, you know what, this is not who you want to sell this land to.
Well, then how would you bring the community together? If you were elected, would you have forums? Would you have town halls?
Well, that's one way. There's a couple of ways to do that. One is definitely to bring, to make people aware that you're going to have a town hall. The other part of it is, have you ever gone past those boards that talk about subdivisions? The white boards with the letters on them that you can't read when you're going 50 miles an hour because they're too small?
Mm-hmm.
Well, why does it have to be that way? Why can't we have a sign that says, I don't know, just has a number on it, and then you go to the county website and you look that number up and you get all that information?
Right.
Why do we only, and I know that they've just recently changed this, but it used to be only, 175 feet from wherever they were gonna build, you only had to notify? Well, that was gonna impact me in my neighborhood because it's the roads I travel on.
Right.
Why shouldn't I receive notification? So one thing is, let's look at the way that we notify people about things that are going to be occurring.
It is a lack of care. Is it a lack of caring, do you think? Or?
No, it's just because that's the way it's always been done. This is the way we've always done it. We've always put these signs up. This is all we're required to do. Okay, but that doesn't mean that works now.
Once you're in the position, you want to change that rule.
Right, so why can't we change it? Why does it have to be that way? Have you ever tried to look this stuff up online? Well, it's very difficult. It's you have to go through layers and layers. Why? Why does it have to be that difficult? Because when it first originally got set up, that's how it was done.
Yeah.
And so that's the way they've always done it. Well, just because they've always done it that way doesn't make it right.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So let's talk about opioid overdoses in Anne Arundel County. I believe the number is it's definitely over 400 overdoses in Anne Arundel County. What do you see as a remedy to that situation? Obviously, there's not just one Band-Aid fix,
Right.
It's done, but what do you see as maybe like a remedy to that? How do you think that maybe the smart stations are working, or safe stations, excuse me? What do you see as being maybe a collective answer to kind of fix that problem that we're having?
Well, it has to, first off, we have to get to the root of why it's occurring. So I mentioned I'm a nurse, and when something happens and it's an adverse reaction becomes to that, then you have to find out why. If I give you a pill and then you break out in a big red rash, we have to figure out whether it was a pill that caused that or whether you ate peanuts in something and you're allergic to peanuts, okay?
Right.
So we have to find out the cause. And once you find out the cause, then we can start applying the fix. So the cause is kids are taking, not only kids, because actually it's a lot not older. Yeah, older. It's older people that are
Right.
So are they taking it for mental health reasons? Are they taking it because, you know, when you take, a lot of times when people take drugs, they take them to escape, to kill whatever pain they have. Not necessarily physical pain, but it's emotional
mental
pain,
pain, right.
mental pain. So if that's the reason, then we need to get to the bottom of what the mental pain is. So that's another issue. That's all mental health, and that's where we have to have that available to people.
Right.
And we have to have it available not Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. We have to have it available on Saturdays at 7 o'clock at night. We have to have it available on Sunday mornings. We have to have it, you know, we have to have access.
24/7.
Right, 24/7 to be able to at least start the management of that. So then we have to, but if we also are having people who have been taking opioids for pain, and they are now chronically addicted to that, now we have to figure out, how do we address the issue of the physical pain, because the physical pain is still there, but how do we address the issue of the physical pain and the issue of the pain medications that they take? So what are we going to start doing? You know, and those are not just, here, let's do this and we'll do that. It's a very complex. Mental health is extremely, the more I learn, the more I understand I didn't know.
Right.
And so it's that. And we have to hold people accountable. You know, there's no reason why a kid goes to the dentist to have the wisdom teeth out and they get 30 Percocet. They don't need 30 Percocet. You know, you give it short periods of time. I'm not saying no Percocet, I'm saying you give it for a short period of time. If there's still problems, then you need to come back and you need to find out why that problem is still occurring. Same
Right.
thing if you, and I worked for rehab. I worked in rehab, physical rehab, total knees, hips, strokes, things like that for 15 years. So I understand pain, I understand acute pain, I understand chronic pain. But, you know, so we have to look at those kind of issues.
Got it. So let's talk about education in Arundel County. I mean, we've fallen quite a bit. Maryland as a state went from one of the best, if not the best, states in education, now down to some polls into like the 11th state in education. And Anne Arundel County as well was fairly good, and now we're not number one in the state anymore. So, what do you think attributes to that? But more importantly, what needs to get done to fix that?
Okay, so I have a real problem with comparing people, because are we comparing apples to apples? Or are we comparing apples to bananas? And they're both a fruit, but they're a different fruit.
Uh-huh.
So by that I mean, for a long time when we were comparing our state or our county against other counties and other states, we didn't have the same metrics that we were measuring by. So then they brought in the Common Core, and so now we have those where the governors came together and decided that by fourth grade, this is the set of knowledge that we need students to learn. And so everybody was starting to be measured then on these same sets of measurements. How you got there was how you got there. Each state could make their own, each county made their own. And so you have the assessments, but then we have all these, do we have too much assessments? You know, if we're constantly just assessing, then when are we really learning as opposed to reacting
Testing.
to something,
Right.
So, so that's that. And then if you're comparing us to places like Finland or China, that's an unfair, in my opinion, that's an unfair thing to compare us with as well. You know, you look at Finland, which is a very homogenous country. They have very little immigration. And so how do you compare that to what's going on in our county, in our state? If you go to China and you say, well, look at that. Well, their kids go to school 6 days a week, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning, going till 6 o'clock at night, and they don't get to decide where they're going to go and what they're going to do.
Right.
And they don't educate everybody. They may decide, you know what? You're just not the smart one. We're going to send you over here, and you don't get any more schooling.
Right.
And so, and we don't. And in our county and in our state, any child that walks through the door, we educate to whatever level we can educate them to. That's a pretty broad statement, because you have some students who come through your doors who just, everything came together and they just fly off the charts. And you have some students, And when you go to some of these specialists and stuff who have such disabilities that they can barely write their name. How do you compare those two? You can't compare those two together.
Right.
Because their growth and the way they're going to grow are differently. So first off, we have to say, are we really comparing what we're supposed to be comparing?
Right.
The other piece is, it's a snapshot in time. That test, whatever that test is right there right now. I may have gotten up, I may be in a home where my family's fighting, where we're having a lot of turmoil, I didn't get any sleep, I didn't rest, I didn't have a chance to study, and I'm coming to take the test next to the same student who parents are in a very stable relationship, who had made sure they had a good dinner that night, made sure they got the rest, got tutors when they were falling behind. So now you're taking that student who came from one environment and that student from another environment, and you're saying they're supposed to know. You know, so I really don't like when we compare, and I know that that's the world we live in.
Right.
But at the same time, I think we need to look at the long picture, the long piece of it. Where were they when they started, and where are they now in terms of the grade that year? Did they make growth? What is growth? We have to decide what is growth. If you have a student who's in third grade, who came from another country, maybe didn't have any education before they got here. They're in third grade, but they're only on a kindergarten reading level. But you have another third grader who has just blown it away and is on a fifth grade level. If that student that's on the fifth grade level only makes it a little bit more, not even to sixth grade, and the other and the one who's not, who's on the kindergarten level, they make it to third grade, whose growth is more or better? How can you decide? Do you know what I mean? So I think that when we ask that question, we have to really look at what we're asking, and we have to then decide what is growth, because that's a big controversy when they were talking about the teachers being paid on the kids who pass, and you know, part of their ratings and stuff like that. Well, who determines what growth is? If I had a student who's in kindergarten, well, let's try third grade. If I have a student who's in third grade and comes to us on a kindergarten reading level, and I'm able to get them in third grade to a first grade reading level, is that growth? Or because they didn't get to third grade, or they're not on level, do I then get penalized? And then do we then say, you know, we didn't do anything for that student? So it's a very complex, and I think that in Anne Arundel County, we have provided opportunities that many students don't have.
Right.
I had the opportunity when I was on the board to be able to go to countrywide, national conferences.
Okay.
And meet people from all over the country.
Right.
And there are some very rural areas where they don't have, 7th and 8th graders are still, and in this day and age, 7th and 8th graders are still in the same classroom. Or you have a 7th, 8th, and 9th grade because you don't have enough students.
Right.
And so therefore you can't do some of the STEM programs that we can do because they don't have the educators to be able to do it, and they don't have the equipment that they need to do it. So can we always make improvements? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Can we always should we always be looking at and changing and adjusting to ensure that we're meeting the needs and moving kids forward at the pace they need to move at? Absolutely. But I'm not a big lover of let's test everybody and let's compare everybody to everybody else.
Right.
Are we meeting the needs of our community? Are we meeting the needs of our society? Are we meeting the needs for these students to be able to become productive and citizens? And that people have to decide that.
And that's what you would bring.
Right.
Got it. So Debbie, how can people get in touch with your campaign? Get a yard sign, email you, talk to you if they want to know more about your positions on certain things that we might not have talked about? How can people donate to your campaign? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, you can go to my website, which is electdebbieritchie.com, and there's information on there, my issues. I have 4 issues that I've really kind of hit on: the public safety, development, environment, and of course education.
Education, right.
And, you know, my kind of major pieces there. And you can get information, you can donate as well. You can contact me at dtritchie@gmail.com.
Ritchie.
That's right, just like the highway.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's DT, because my middle name is Tracy, and that's when I set it up, so.
Debbie Tracy Ritchie.
Yeah, there's a gal.
Debbie Ritchie, she's running for Anne Arundel County Council District 3. Debbie, thank you so much for the
Thank
time
you,
to talk
no
to us.
problem.
I really appreciate it. And if
Yeah.
you win, we'd be more than happy and willing to have you on to talk about how things are going
Sure,
on the
great.
council and talk about your progress as a councilwoman. We wish you the best
Good.
of luck and thank you so much for
Thank
sitting
you.
down with us.
Okay.
So reporting here from Annapolis, Joseph Olmo, the Arundel Patriot.